Hello and welcome to Three Big Things, a Cineboys, but not the Cineboys podcast, part of the Cork Bats Podcast Network. I'm Kenny from Cork Bats, head boy of the Cineboys, and Three Big Things is a podcast where I sit down with a guest or guests to discuss this weekend's biggest movie release. Why is it called Three Big Things? Simple. We're giving you three big things, sometimes more. Sometimes you'll get lucky, you'll get a fourth thing that you should consider if you're on the fence about seeing a movie. This week, we are discussing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and I will be joined by two guests. So let's start with, first and foremost, below me here, Mr. Billy Rock. Billy, how are you?
What's up, Cineboys? I'm glad to be here. I think this is my first Cineboys podcast with Tom of any
Yeah,
of the iterations of the Cineboys. So
I Yeah, that's probably true. I was gonna say I thought you did one with us like a year or so
there
ago.
was
yeah,
one
well,
like way long time ago that maybe I think Tom was on.
maybe, but I normally replace Tom because he
That's
seems to be
true.
the busiest
Yes,
with
Tom's
Got
the
a lot of
most
a lot of things going
Tom's the
on
most mature slash most responsible of all of us, and
to
actually,
my own detriment.
me, Bob, and Kevin are what you would refer to as dinks, and Tom is not a
okay.
dink, which I didn't know what that was until last week, and now it's my favorite thing. Um, but yeah, Billy of Do You Like Apples? We're really glad you're here to discuss this film. And we'll get into it here in a bit. But I do also want to introduce our other guest, who's also part of the Cineboys podcast. First time on Three Big Things. First timer, Mr. Tom Bragg. Tom, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Dude, I'm good. I'm really good.
Good.
I'll just be real up front. This doesn't count as my big thing, but I'm really excited to talk about this movie.
Me too.
I
Agreed, guys. Yeah.
absolutely fucking loved it.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
that's not my one big thing either. I just needed to get it off my chest. But again, we're talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is a sequel to 2018's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And Across the Spider-Verse is directed by Joaquim Dos Santos, Kim Powers, Justin K. Thompson. Again, it is a sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And it stars or is voiced by, it is an animated film, although there are a few live action stars who show up in it, which is cool. But it stars Shamik Moore, Haley Steinfeld, Oscar Isaac, Jake Johnson, Brian Tyree Henry, amongst others, amongst a lot of other voices. Andy Samberg's in there too. Daniel Kaluuya, a lot of voices. It is of course based on Marvel Comics Spider-Man and Miles Morales. And a quick plot summary for you. After reuniting with Gwen Stacy, Brooklyn's full-time friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is catapulted across the multiverse where he encounters a team of spider people charged with protecting its very existence. However, when the heroes clash on how to handle a new threat, Miles finds himself pitted against the other spiders. He must soon redefine what it means to be a hero so he can save the people he loves most. Okay, so we're going to get into it. Again, we're just going to go over three big things. We each brought one big thing that we want to talk about this movie. We will say this before we really get into it. We're going to try to be spoiler free, but just to cover our asses, we're going to say light spoilers, spoiler adjacent.
Spoiler adjacent.
Okay,
Yeah,
spoiler
for sure.
adjacent. There might be something in there that you'll hear that maybe you don't want to hear quite yet, and maybe you just see the movie first and then come back and listen to the podcast. But yeah, so let's get into it. We're each brought one big thing, and of course, I think we should start with our very special guest, Billy, first. So Billy, what is your one big thing about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse?
Well, last time I was on here, I'd had to convince you guys to go see Bo's Afraid. Based on the box office results, did not happen.
No.
This time I have a little bit easier of a job, and my big thing is this just brought back like being awed by movies for me.
Yeah.
Just at like the first 10 minutes of the movie, there's zero Miles Morales. And if he didn't show
Yeah.
up for the entire movie, I wouldn't have cared. Like
Right?
I was so enthralled by those first 10 minutes. I won't say who the characters that are in it because they're not really spoilers because it's in the first 10 minutes, but I'll give you guys that surprise itself. Um, and then as it goes along, like the things that might trip you up about comic book movies are some plot holes. But if the movie's good enough, you don't really care about the plot holes, and especially movies that deal with multiverse type stuff, which has been way too many comic book movies these days. but I honestly didn't care. Like there's so many different Easter eggs thrown out that kept your interest in, and along with the jokes, the beautiful animation, the wonderful voice work by specifically Jason Schwartzman, who you left off of your
Yeah.
I did.
statement. But
Yeah.
sorry if I
I noticed
took
that.
one of your
But
big
that
things,
was
but
that he's a pretty big part of this film.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I don't want to say what character he plays because we'll leave him at that. But and then the movie did such a good job of subverting expectations without eventually going back to the formula of comic book movies.
Hmm.
And all those together just made me really awed by a comic book movie for the first time. Probably, I can't even remember the last comic book movie that I was just like so pumped about when I left the theater. So it's kind of, for better and for worse, got me back into this genre a little bit more. I think I'm just like more of a Spider-Man fan these days than any big Marvel encompassing universe, which just doesn't connect to the MCU at all. Besides some Easter eggs thrown in there occasionally. But man, what a great experience! I'm awed. Had no idea how the animators did it. They were given 5 years to complete it, which they got the time they needed, thankfully. And I want to know what that script looked like because I can't even imagine what they had on the piece of paper before they started explaining and making the movie because
Yeah.
it was beautiful. It was a really great
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the first 10 minutes of the movie because that for me, like, it doesn't start. I mean, we'll just say it kind of goes into the backstory of another major character of this film franchise. And it is probably the most, like, I don't know if you would have, if you explain the first 10 minutes on to me, like, if you were just to say, like, here's what happens in the first 10 minutes, I'd be like, okay, cool. But, like, actually seeing it and seeing how it's voiced or acted, plus the way that they use animation to push emotion and, like, in
Yeah.
a way that I've never seen that done before in an animated
Yep.
film. I was like in almost in tears in like 10 minutes in this movie, and it's not even particularly like super emotional, I would say, but it's so creative. And like I was sitting there just thinking about this is so incredible. I haven't felt this way in a movie in a really long time. And so yeah, I'm with you. It's a it's a game changer when it comes to, I think, I don't think it's going to be the norm for superhero movies. I still think you're still going to get your standard, run of the mill MCU, DC kind of like live action movies. I don't think it's going to change any of that, but I do think um, it is a new standard for animated
Yeah.
films.
And to be honest, I don't think I'd want it to like become the new stand or no, I don't think I'd want it to become as big as like these more live action techniques that they're using to make movies. Like I love that this is going to be kind of like a self-contained story in a sense, as far as I know anyway. Um, and so the fact that they went the animation route and did it so well, I really love that, and I want it to remain kind of like a small thing. I don't want it to get overblown.
Yeah. And I would also say too that, like, I think that I went back and watched Into the Spider Verse last night after I saw the movie, and I do think that to me this felt like the Dark Knight of animated superhero movies. Like, it's not as dark as the Dark Knight per se, but it has that feel of like, hey, like, this was our first movie, it was really really good. This is our second movie, and we're completely just raising the bar. And I think it was successful in doing that. I personally think that the sequel, as much as I love Into the Spider Verse, I personally think that this sequel is a better film. I think there's a better, I wouldn't say more well told, but a more engaging story. Um, yeah, I think that's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
even at points I caught myself like almost losing where I was in the plot, not because it was told confusingly, but I was just amazed by what was happening on screen. Just like
Yeah.
all
this
the
is
different images taking you to each
Yeah.
right.
corner. Like Lord Miller with all of their movies have been, they didn't direct it, but have always been
Hmm.
clear about um, having little Easter eggs on each corner of the screen. And then all of a sudden you're like caught over here. Then you need to go back to the middle to catch the dialogue again. And so there were at times I was like, oh, I got to catch back up to where the story's actually going.
Yeah.
But that took 30 seconds. I was caught back in. and yeah, just loved the entire experience for the most part. It was really, really great.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that adds to just the fact that also it makes the movie insanely rewatchable.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like, I'm very excited to go see this movie again. Um, but yeah, Billy, thanks for your one big thing.
Of course.
Let's move to our second big thing and let's talk and ask Tom, what was your one big thing on this movie?
Yeah. I feel like, both you guys kind of touched on it briefly a little bit already, but honestly, I was just blown away by the animation. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. Granted, I'm not like super into animated movies to begin with. I feel like it's one of those things that, typically mostly for kids. And the animation these days, it's fine typically, but I was just really struck by their use of animation and just the different styles of animation. So like Friday night, I watched Into the Spider-Verse for the first time. I'd never seen it,
Oh wow.
and there's that character, I forget her name, but um, she's like the anime
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man,
Penny?
and just
Yeah.
like yeah,
Yeah.
and just like the contrasting images on the screen, I was just blown away at how seamless everything was. Like
Mm-hmm.
nothing seemed um like out of sorts,
Mhm.
even though that's kind of like the images that you're getting are like out of sorts images, but they all fit really well. And Kenny, I think you just said something about, the way that I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but the way that they use animation to kind of like move emotions. So, like for instance, in Across the Spider Verse, there's a scene between Gwen and her father that's a pretty emotional scene. Like I didn't get misty eyed or anything, but the way that they like kind of bled the background colors together and kind of
Mhm.
like the dad kind of like faded back into the background a little bit from like I mean it looks like watercolors to me. I don't
Yeah.
know what the technique is, but
Mm-hmm.
just the way that it all bled together and made it more I don't know, softer and just kind of like helped elevate the emotion behind the dialogue and everything that the characters are feeling. I just thought it was just, I don't know, it was perfect.
Yeah,
Like
it
I can't
is.
get over it.
It is the. I would say it's a just kind of a new, definitely. I mean, maybe not the new norm, but definitely a new standard of storytelling.
Yeah,
Because I think you guys kind of said it too. The way that I've viewed animated movies in the past is like it's a cartoon. Like, and that's really all I think about it. And yes, there are some really, really good animated films that have come out before this one,
yeah,
that, but still fit into that category of like it's a cartoon. I think about Toy Story 3. Probably, if I'm going to think of any other animated movie that I like as much, Toy Story 3 is certainly up there. Toy Story 3 is just a cartoon to me. It's a good cartoon. It's a really good
right.
movie, but the way that this movie uses its animation, it's a tool to tell the story. Whereas like with movies like Toy Story, it's like it's a story that happens to be animated.
Mhm.
Um,
I feel like with a lot of different studios, animation studios, the thing they're trying to crack first is like their animation style,
mhm.
and that carries through every single one of their movies.
Yep.
Yeah,
Pixar, you can kind of
yep,
tell is trying to change it up a little bit in terms of their own style, but from Toy Story 1 all the way through Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4, everyone in between, it's unmistakably a Pixar movie. And then you have like Miyazaki, who does all of his wonderful Studio Ghibli movies, and like probably the most beautiful animation you can see out there, but like, it's his style. It's
Hmm.
Japanese, it's his style. Whereas this runs the risk, the Spider-Verse movies runs the risk of having no identity.
Hmm.
And I think it still does. Like, even though like
mm-hmm.
every different frame seems to be different animation style within different scenes, like Tom, the scene that you're talking about, like it kind of starts bleeding together, and then you get a close up, and all of a sudden you can see like every pore of
Yeah,
character or something like that. And like
yeah,
all of a sudden it's realistic again. And yeah, it could run the risk of being jumbled together, but the animation was just unreal with maybe not having a full reputation yet, but by the time I'm assuming a third movie is going to come out,
Hmm.
is I think it's
next
going to be
year.
like, oh, that's a Spider Verse only aesthetic,
Hmm.
Yeah,
and I think it's not replicable, and I think that's going to make this potential trilogy really unique and stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, the animation is a feat to behold, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic. Well, cool, Tom. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, I guess we've got one big thing we got to get to, and that's my big thing. And mine's actually pretty simple. It's a prediction. So I'm predicting right here that this movie will win Best Animated Feature at the Oscars.
Oh yeah.
And I also think that this movie will be nominated for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't, somebody screwed up big time. Because there's, to me, if you're thinking about what makes a film Best Picture worthy, it wouldn't be a precedent setting thing by any means to have an animated film get nominated for Best Picture. It has happened several times. But in this instance, I think that you can't overlook how incredibly well told this story is, with the backdrop of it being animation, also being animation that is uniquely, set apart from almost anything we've ever seen, even to a degree where I think it's even unique against Into the Spider-Verse, the original film. It takes some big swings that even that film didn't take. All in the service of the story, where it's not just animation, it's not just cool stuff for cool stuff's sake. It's all there to tell a story, bring humor, bring emotion, all of this stuff. I don't think you can overlook that. And the fact that, like, people made this film, like, animators made this film, and that I'm sure they will sweep it. Like, they'll get all these technical awards, no problem. But I do think that, like, to overlook it, being worthy of a Best Picture nomination, I don't know if it'll win. Certainly pretty early on in the year, we got a lot of films that are still going to come out. But I do think that it's deserving of that, because I'm currently writing the review for Cork Bats, and one of the things that I'm going to mention in there is that for me, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me, from top to bottom, this is a perfect movie. From animation, voice acting, direction, audio, music. I think music plays a huge part in this film as well. Storytelling, representation, all of this stuff. This movie is a perfect movie. It will get a 5 Swedish fish, and I've only given that out one other time. 5 Swedish fish review for Corked Bats, and I'm very excited to finish writing that. Just because, and I have to put like disclaimers in it because I'm like, look, maybe you've seen it already, and maybe you don't want to hear me talk about this movie, but like, I just can't help but gush over it. So that's my big thing. My big thing is a prediction that this movie will absolutely win Best Animated Feature, and it will be nominated for Best Picture. So
I think this has the best chance. I'm trying to think. Like you said, there have been Best Picture animated movies. Has there ever been an animated movie nominated for anything besides visual effects, Best Picture, and Best International Feature? Like, will it get a screenplay nominee? Is kind of what I'm really.
I don't know.
That's a good
Yeah,
thought.
like I don't like there won't be a performance just because one, it's a jumbled up movie in a good way.
Yeah.
There's not one main guy that stole the show that will have that type of recognition. I don't think a voice actor ever will.
No.
But yeah, I think there's a chance for screenplay. I think it's a lock for both the ones you mentioned, Kenny. But if I was a betting man, which I might throw a little bit on, I guess it would be no, it wouldn't be original because it's a sequel. So, but anyways, adapted screenplay. But we'll see. I would love that to be a big story of the night of if it will win anything but international feature. And I think it has a really good chance. If at least the beginning of this year is, I don't see any Oscar favorites yet.
True.
For beginning of the year.
No, granted, it is June, and so I mean, typically it gets a little heavier on the scales towards the end of the year, and that's why I say too, like, I'm not going to make a prediction whether or not it would win something like Best Picture. But if you're going to ask me, compared to all the other movies I've seen so far this year, I mean, it's far and away the best. I think my other favorite movie this year was Blackberry, which is not a, save for a few really good performances, I don't think is an Oscar worthy film.
Right.
But I can't compare this one to anything else I've seen so far this year. But we still got, more than half of the year left. So we'll see. Yeah. So look out for that. And if I'm wrong, you can find this clip and be like, you said it was going to be nominated for Best Picture and it wasn't. You're an idiot. That's fine.
That'd be a travesty. Like I think
Yeah.
I'm not quite there to say like this will be in my top of the year or anything like that. But yeah, just who would watch this movie and not who's a voting Academy member and wouldn't have it
Right.
in the top 10
Yeah.
in some capacity.
Yeah.
I just don't really see it.
I would have
Especially
a, I,
with
yeah.
like Everything Everywhere last year, which a very much more original movie, but in terms of it being an original script. But I think that type of storytelling was a signifier maybe across the Spider-Verse and respect that it deserves. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would have trouble, like, if I were a voting member of the Academy, I would have trouble not, like, putting in, my thoughts, my nominations, whatever. Like, I would have a really hard time sitting there thinking, like, yeah, this movie doesn't deserve to be recognized for Best Picture. Like, I don't think I could
Right.
do that. That just, so, yeah. Well, cool. Guys, we did it. The third episode of Three Big Things is in the bag. I will say this.
Nice.
I'll leave it open. If anybody else has one other thing they want to share for one final bonus big thing.
I don't.
No?
I'll just say my cynicism went away. I travel a lot yesterday, getting home from out of town. I knew I was doing the podcast. I got in around 3, and I was like, God, the last thing I want to do is go see this movie right now. But I sucked it up, and like within the first 10 minutes, my cynicism was gone, my tiredness was
nice.
gone. I fully embraced it, and it was wonderful.
It was funny you say
Awesome.
that because I saw it yesterday as well, but I had to see it very early because my day was kind of filled up with some stuff, and I was like, man, I hate just like having to fill in to go see a movie. Like, I hate filling it into my schedule because then it doesn't feel like I'm getting to
Takes
go
the
see
joy
it.
out of it.
Exactly, yeah. So it was like I went to a 10:45 showing yesterday
Heck yeah.
morning.
Dude, I went to a 9:40 on Saturday.
Oh,
It was
nice.
great.
Well, I'll say this. I'll get to it in a second, but just the idea of like I've got to fit this into my schedule today, and then like actually sitting there, same thing. Within 10 minutes, I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna like this a lot. Like this is gonna be a really good time. And then like getting done with it, and then realizing I had to go do all these things. I'm like, man, you're gonna make me go do this after I just saw that movie? Like, there's more important things than these errands. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Kind of something that I felt the same seeing as well. So, well, cool, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Billy, as the special guest. Tom, you're special too.
That's
But
all right.
Billy, as the very special guest, would you like to plug your stuff?
Absolutely. I am Billy Rock of Do You Like Apples? We release a newsletter every Friday, typically in the morning. And yeah, we're on Substack. So just Google Do You Like Apples on Substack and you'll find us right away on Instagram and Twitter at YouLike_apples. And a lot of work needs to be done to plan this, but I'm positive in saying that a pretty regular podcast is going to start with us soon.
All
So,
right.
yeah,
Nice.
name and all that TBD, but we're hoping next month we can start releasing some stuff. So
Very
Awesome.
cool. That's
Will,
exciting.
will you keep doing your newsletter too?
yeah, that
Because
one's
I
yeah.
love the newsletter.
Thanks.
It's
I
great.
appreciate it. So yeah, just inevitably when our podcast ends, we'll still have the newsletter. So,
Great.
but yeah, no, it's fun. We got the juices flowing, and a movie like this kind of makes it even more exciting to adventure into a different type of platform to talk about what you love. So
Definitely. Well, glad you're here, man. And then, Tom, is there anything you want to plug?
Nah, that's all right.
Okay, cool. I'll plug it for you. My name's Kenny. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Cinebois podcast. Tom is also one of the co-hosts of the Cinebois podcast. And you can follow this podcast. If you're listening to us right now, you're getting this podcast as part of being a subscriber or follower to our podcast. So please consider subscribing. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. We're everywhere. Like, there's no limits to where you can find us. So be sure to follow us. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at Cinebois, Twitter and Instagram. And then you can also follow Corked Bats. We are part of the Corked Bats podcast network. Follow Corked Bats on Twitter and Instagram at Corked Bats. Also, be sure to check out corkedbats.com. Our review of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse will be up within the next 24 hours. And we'll probably link to this conversation as well, so you can check that out. And then be sure also to check out youtube.com/corkbats, where you can check out our VOD podcast, where we put the video up on YouTube. And I think that's it. Also, merch. We got merch. You can buy our merch. Look, I even put up the slide right now. Merch available now. corkbats.com/store. Go buy a t-shirt. Billy, have you bought a t-shirt yet?
Yeah, I bought 10.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah.
I guess we just haven't seen that money come in
Sweet
yet.
boy.
But
Yeah,
I'm sure you're not lying. That's cool.
Check is in the mail.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the
All right. Cool. Well, guys, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.
Later.
Peace, guys.
See you.